Today on CityCast DC, we are talking about the fate of RFK. That is the stadium, not the man. We'll also talk about DC culture in the second age of Trump, and can a restaurant ban 20-somethings? I'm here with Axios DC's Junaid Deal and CityCast's Priyanka Tilve. Today is Friday, December 20th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, Junaid.
Hey, Mike. It's good to be on.
Hey, Priyanka.
Hello.
All right. So, Junaid, you cover DC government politics. We've actually done 2 EPs this week about big stuff at the DC Council, their end of the session, and what are they going to do with their accused of corruption member. But just to show that legislative dysfunction is not limited to municipal bodies, Congress, as we speak, appears to be careening towards a government shutdown, which would idle a lot of our neighbors and listeners and our city. It also really screws around with the subject that I expected that we'd be talking about today, which is the fate of the RFK Stadium site. Part of this massive end-of-the-year bill in Congress that is now imperiled was transferring that site to DC's control so it could be turned maybe into a stadium or maybe have a fight about it and have something else. So we're recording this on Thursday morning, and things are evolving pretty fast. So if they have evolved so fast that this is overtaken by events, by the time you hear this, our apologies. What's the state of play right now?
Yeah, it took 2 years to kind of get this through Congress, and it took lobbying from the NFL, from the city, from the commanders to get this bill into a position where it could finally pass the full Congress. We finally got that when it made this year-end spending bill, which is just, 1,000 plus pages of all the things members of Congress want to put in before the year ends, in addition to keeping the government open. And everyone was cheering and happy. It looked like the mayor and the commanders were going to get their Christmas wish. Except, let's remember now, this is the Trump Washington 2.0, and it might not happen because the whole bill is in peril now after Trump and many of his allies, including Elon Musk, came out against this spending bill. They think it's too much government spending on certain things they don't like, and there's some inaccuracy as well there in terms of some of the things that are in the bill. But basically, they're threatening to torpedo this whole bill, and it's crazy just because, the mayor and everyone thought, okay, we're finally, in the clear here, and this is just a formality. The House and the Senate will pass this now that the RFK provision is in, and not so fast. We're watching this moving very quickly now, and with the threat that RFK might not make it into this bill after all.
All right, I've got 8 million questions about this because it's such a weird situation. But the backstory is that technically where RFK Stadium exists is federal national park property. And so in order to turn it into the stadium of the team ownership and the city leadership's dreams, you got to transfer it to city control. So they try to do this, eventually gets lopped in with a whole bunch of other random spending measures in what the nerds call a CR, continuing resolution. The things that blew up the CR are not the stadium. Is that right?
Yeah, the main reasons are not the stadium. There are all sorts of more particular things that conservatives, hardliners are especially upset about. I won't really get into those for the sake of things, but RFK did make it into Elon's Twitter or X feed.
And what was his problem with the stadium deal?
Yeah, there was this very inaccurate viral X post from a user that insinuated this was a taxpayer giveaway, that the CR was funding $3 billion or some amount of money for a football stadium in DC, which is inaccurate. Just the bill just transfers control of the site. There's no money attached to the bill. But basically, Elon ran with this and said, this is another reason why we should kill this CR bill. And obviously, his millions of followers are retweeting it and reposting it. So in a weird way, the idea that this was giving somehow a taxpayer giveaway to DC for a new football stadium did end up making the online discourse around this, and much of it was very misleading and false.
I feel like a really key part of this is that even if RFK comes up as a consideration again next year, because Musk laid out these, albeit inaccurate, statements about RFK, it's hard to imagine that it's going to get any sort of traction in the new Congress because no one's going to want to touch it. Like, why push for something that doesn't impact your constituents, doesn't really help your cause at all, if it's going to bring on the misguided ire of this powerful man?
Well, I can give you a reason. This thing is supported by all the NFL owners who are billionaires. And if there's one thing I've heard about this new group, billionaires have a friendly ear listening to them.
That's a fair point. Maybe the billionaires will lobby more successfully, but it is just hard to imagine that anyone in Congress is going to want to touch RFK. And it just makes me, I was really mad reading about this on Wednesday night because it just feels like Trump isn't in office yet. Elon Musk is not really ever supposed to be in office. He's not an elected official. And it just feels like evidence of them already interfering in DC affairs in a totally illogical and unnecessary and like guided by misinformation way.
Well, wait. I mean, the question there also is what does the mayor, the people around her, the team, people around the team think? If this CR doesn't make it or the stadium doesn't make it into there, what kind of chances do they have of just like doing the same thing legislatively in January?
I don't think they would be enthusiastic about picturing that scenario, considering it took so long for it to get through Congress. I've even heard like speculation that it's going to be such a tough ask for the franchise to go through another lobbying cycle if it doesn't pass this year, and they might throw in the towel in DC. Now, we don't know what's going to happen. What they want is a clean CR, which is what Trump and his allies want. They want a clean CR. They want something that will just fund the government, stripped away from all these other added measures. Could a RFK bill still make it because it's not new government spending? Maybe. I don't know. Whenever I ask my sources who are around this in Congress, they are unsure. It's up to the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, frankly. So I wouldn't totally rule it out, maybe getting through still this year, but this was its best chance of passing.
Well, wait a minute. Like, there's a lot of people in the city who do not want a new football stadium built, who look out and say, gee, housing is incredibly expensive in the city. This is a huge, very rare, open chunk of land in DC. We can do something else with it. Are those people happy, or does the lack of transfer mean that it's basically got to stay the way it is, and even if you wanted to just turn it into housing or something, you couldn't do that?
I think everyone wants the transfer to happen because you actually can't build housing on it right now. What the RFK site allows DC currently is actually to build a new stadium. So they can build a stadium. They just can't build any housing or anything else around it, which is what stadiums are really about these days. It's about not just the field and the stands, but also the energy, the neighborhood around it. So DC wants to build the whole mini city, mini district around it. And that's what they need the bill to pass for.
If it does get through, miraculously. My sense has been momentum-wise that things are all going with the mayor who wants to give the team a stadium. Is the fix in? Like if Congress did this and there was a debate in DC of, should we use this space to build a stadium and housing, or should we use it to just build housing and no stadium? Is there any scenario after that where the city doesn't build a stadium?
Yeah, any stadium deal has to get approved by the council, and we could come out of this in a scenario where the bill passes Congress, but the council rejects a stadium deal and there's no stadium built. Or frankly, it's even possible the commanders could say, well, we don't really like the offer from the district. We're actually going to stay in Maryland and maybe build a new stadium in Maryland. Or, it's very unlikely, but they could also look at Virginia as well.
Yeah, as part of the negotiations to get the RFK bill into the continuing resolution, didn't the commanders have to agree to redevelop the Landover site where they currently play? Like, they were like, if we're leaving, we will redevelop this stadium and fix it up for you on our way out the door.
I saw that. The Post reported that. They reported that the ownership of the commanders agreed to redevelop the Landover site, the Northwest Field, formerly FedEx Field site, and they would redevelop it into something of equal economic activity, which I don't know what that would be.
Yeah, I don't know how they measure that. But it's like, if they have to do that anyway, if they've agreed to that regardless, assuming that that deal still stands. I don't know where any of these deals are at this moment, but then they might be incentivized, just be like, well, we have to redevelop Northwest Field anyway. Let's just stay here. Why go through the effort of lobbying Trump and Musk to give RFK back to DC if they could just stay where they are?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very like rapidly moving situation, obviously, but yes, I think you're right. I don't think they want to go through more lobbying. It could get in this year, it might not. And, they have a site in Maryland, and Maryland would be very happy to keep them there.
The other big thing I want to talk about this week, I guess it's sort of related, which it all comes down to relations between the District of Columbia and the new Republican trifecta. In this case, sort of social relations, after hours relations. During the first Trump years, there was like a string of incidents where like some Trump bigwig would be hectored or denied service or something at a restaurant, and the right wing would get all up in arms, and the situation would usually be a little more complicated than it was presented as. But, it was, at the time, really sort of a break in norms, where in Washington, the idea had been whoever you are in politics, you get to be a civilian, when you're out to dinner with your family and friends. So a friend of CityCast, Jessica Sidman, wrote a piece last week speculating about whether we would see a return of that kind of incident. It's I think a different vibe right now. There's much less of the sort of like performative resistance stuff going on, so maybe not. But she quoted somebody, a server at Bouchert's Saloon on the Hill, saying that she had refused to serve anyone who she knew to be trying to deport millions of people. This caused a flurry because it got picked up in right-wing media who wanted to, paint a picture of a city of intolerant snowflakes. It also caught the attention of her bosses, who, as people who own a restaurant in a tight margin industry, are mostly concerned with getting butts in seats, whatever their politics. And they fired her. But not before United States Senator Mike Lee had tweeted that this is a reason to end home rule and force a law that would ban this kind of discrimination against Republicans, unaware perhaps that there already is such a law. DC is one of the not common number of municipalities where partisan affiliation is a protected status, just the same as race or gender or something. But I guess the question that I'm watching is like, one, are we going to see a return of this kind of stuff? And two, what is the political fallout of that going to be at a time when there's a lot of peril for home rule and self-government in DC?
Yeah, I think it's a really hard thing to predict because, like you said, Mike, I feel like the vibe of the city this time is a lot more resigned in a lot of ways. I mean, there is also like this movement called Defend DC that's cropped up that's trying to organize and, figure out ways to protect the city legally and through community and local activism. But the vibe does seem a little bit dismayed and quiet. But then at the same time, I think that the Trump administration this time around seems extra fired up, more likely, it feels like, to say things that people find morally reprehensible and potentially pass things that affect DC and that DC locals are seriously upset by, which is what this woman was saying. The server and manager who was fired, she had said, like, it's not like I'm just going to not serve Republicans. She doesn't want to support people who have, quote, moral convictions that are strongly opposed to mine. And I feel like that's going to come up more and more this time.
And technically that's legal. Like you can't throw someone out of your restaurant for being a Republican, but you can throw them out for, smelling or for, being a racist or being a Nazi, or as long as it's not about being a member of the National Socialist Party. So there is a distinction. You can choose to not associate with people for all kinds of reasons. Just the formal party registration is not one of them.
Though I do think that this story will, this is a very public incident, obviously, that I'm sure a lot of people in the hospitality industry have heard of. And there might be fear over acting out because of it.
I mean, you got to figure, like, on the vibes thing, like activists going to activist, right? So there will always be people, I hope there always are people, who are organizing in order to advocate for causes they care about. The question is whether this comes down to like the level of your random, person sitting at the next table at a restaurant, and whether they take things into their hands, and whether, in so doing, they make things better or worse. And my sense has been the mood is pretty different, like on the server level. But this tension is, Junaid, you wrote this week about Andrew Clyde, a member of Congress, the person who described January 6th as a normal tourist visit. He wants to get rid of Black Lives Matter Plaza, which is on 16th Street, technically federal highway land. And, they see it, I think, not inaccurately, considering what the mood was in 2020, as like a middle finger pointed at the Trump White House. It's the same way that there's this history in Washington of renaming the street outside like some foreign embassy after like a dissident in that country. This was like the equivalent of that, except pointed at our own country. And they won't get rid of it. So these are like, there is a kind of a, like if DC acts out too much, if individual people in DC act out too much, a real desire to smack them down.
There's almost a random ways DC's going to get in the crossfire with like RFK Stadium, boiling over Twitter and Elon happening to see that and making an issue out of it. Then there's more of these targeted maneuvers that congressmen will make. And Andrew Clyde is from Georgia, but he's taken a keen interest in DC. He has talked about trying to overturn home rule in the past, and he still talks about that, but we're waiting on the bill. If he actually ever wants to seriously introduce it, we'll see. But he wants to introduce a bill this time to dismantle Black Lives Matter Plaza, which, as you said, was it was a giant rebuke to President Trump in June 2020 when the mayor decided to create that. And the city has spent money on making it spruced up and into a nice plaza. They spent $4.8 million on making it pedestrian friendly and sort of spanning 2 city blocks. But yes, I mean, he wants to get rid of it. He wants to scrub it and make it the way it was before, which is just a street, near the White House.
Could they actually do that, do you think? Would that be a thing that the filibuster could stop?
Yeah, I mean, like, speaking of big congressional bills, I mean, this could just be another bill that gets added on to one of these giant spending bills next year. He has to introduce it first and then see if he'll get traction on it. But I've been curious, actually, in my reporting to find out whether the president could do this unilaterally, because there is talk of it being federal highway land. DC's former transportation director has called it a critical federal highway route, which just made me think, can the president do it himself? And I haven't found out, but if either of you find out first, let me know. But it is something to watch. I think congressional action is more likely, though, in terms of if they want to actually get rid of Black Lives Matter Plaza.
Just talk about a colossal waste of taxpayer money. But sure, it would be an easy symbolic win for them. I can totally see them doing it.
I think it would be an easy symbolic shot in the foot for them, because it's much easier to pick on sort of abstract, entitled bureaucrats, or like that kind of straw man, than like when there's actual images of people painting over that. It's I don't think that's a good day.
I hope you're right. I guess we'll see.
So speaking of the welcomingness of restaurants in Washington as a metaphor for cultural divides, you have a much more apolitical thing that you were obsessed with this week, Priyanka.
Yes, unless there is a party for only people under 30.
Wait, how old are you?
I'm 32. I can
Busted.
go. I can go to this bar.
Wow, I'm going to be the only one filing a complaint against this bar.
Yeah, it's actually just Mike and I are going to go hang out and make faces at you from inside. To back it up, there's this restaurant in Capitol Hill called Cafe 8. It's a Mediterranean spot. And they came up with this policy that has been in the news this week, where they aren't letting anyone into the restaurant after 8:30 p.m. if they're under the age of 30. They say that this is because they're kind of in like a residential area. I guess they decided that people under 30 are especially loud and rowdy. The person who manages the restaurant, Elif Sam, said that the move was partly prompted by crime in the area. So this is sad. Her father was beaten up by teenagers while walking from the restaurant a few months ago. Last month, she says a group of young men with guns tried to enter the restaurant, and security was able to keep them out, but that concerned her.
Wait, is that really what it's about? Or is this that they just want to have a place that's like, pleasant for oldsters?
I agree with you. I feel like those are easy things to point to. Like, I feel like anytime a restaurant or any establishment in DC wants to do something that's kind of unpopular, they're like, we're doing it because of crime.
But wait, is this legal?
It's unclear. Actually, that's something that people are still trying to figure out. Under federal law, unlike political partisanship, age is not a protected class in service settings, I should say. So it's really not clear. That's kind of what the conversation this week has been. It's been lawyers trying to figure out if this is legal or not. Laws that apply to public accommodations do ban discrimination when it comes to race, religion, national origin, disability, but not age.
Was this restaurant actually a place where young people hung out before this?
Look, that I don't know. I have never been there.
Oh, I mean, being an elderly lady of 32, I can understand.
Yes, exactly. Even in my youth, I never frequented this restaurant, but they must feel like there's some reason why they wanted to ban them, right?
Do we think this is good, bad? Do we think this is evil?
Evil feels like a stretch, but I guess I feel that there is, as someone over 32, I like the idea of going a place where you're not going to have, recent college grads going crazy and like knocking back shots and whatever in a loud and annoying way. But I also don't feel like it's necessary to formally ban them. Like, there are lots of places in the city that have the vibe that draws an older crowd, and you can just go to those places.
A lot of the restaurants in my neighborhood, I feel super young when I go there because I'm like the youngest person there, and I'm not young. But look at, I actually think, I remember when in New York, when they first banned smoking in bars, one of the weird side effects was a lot of like, new parents with young kids would actually like, well, we can still hang out at the bar, and would come like particularly at brunch and stuff. And the younger people were like, this blows. Like, we've got all these like people with babies in here. It's no fun anymore. And, there is like these weird moments where like generations and tastes collide. And I actually think first of all, if you're a restaurant and you can afford to ban any category of people, like, more power to you. But it seems to me like, I don't know, if they want to do that, it's their funeral, but that's okay with me.
Yeah, I just feel like this was a massive PR fail. There are ways to curate your audience more subtly by the types of drinks you offer, the type of lighting you have. There was a joke on Twitter that they were like, okay, well, if this is only for people over 30, I hope that they're going to keep their lights way up so that everyone can actually read the menu. A
large print menu.
which I felt very called out by. I have great eyesight, by the way. I think that there are more subtle ways to do it.
How about you, Jeanette? You're gonna go there it'll be like a sit-in.
Listen, I have not heard of this place, and I can't go for 2 more years apparently, and I don't think I will go.
All right, well, Jeanette, awesome to see you, my friend.
Good to see you.
And I hope you have a great holiday.
Thank you. You too. Happy holidays.
And Priyanka, I will see you next year because we're actually going to take a break from CityCast between now and then. But you will hear a few of our favorite eps in the next week. You call them reruns. We call them classics. We'll be back in January to give you our guide to the month on the 2nd.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks, Mike.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. That's all for this year here on CityCast DC. Our production team this week was Priyanka Tilve, Julia Karen, and Ash Durbin. Newsletter editors Kayla Cote-Stemmerman and Lane Fisher wrote our fabulous newsletter Hey DC this week. And our hosts are Bridget Todd and me, Michael Schaefer from Politico. Music is by Alex Roldan. If you enjoyed the show, text a friend who is over 30. Happy holidays, Happy New Year, and we will talk to you in January.